Shiur in גיטין. Final shiur in Siman Kuf Chof Hey. We didn't discuss all the sifim. Today we're going to go through a different kind of shiur. Rather than going through the Shulchan Aruch and the Mefarshim and the סיכום, which are relevant to the Siman, we're going to go through a bunch of Tשובות and the Tzemach Tzedek, Sheris Yehuda, Alter Rebbe, which are all in your white book, which are relevant to it. Now, just as an introduction, so you should just know, I'm not going to go through all the Tשובות, but there is the Tשובות of Tzemach Tzedek that are connected to this topic are Kuf Samach Dalet, Samach Hey, Samach Vav, Samach Zayin, Samach Ches, Samach Tes, Kuf Samach Dalet through Kuf Samach Tes, and Shin Pei Zayin through Shin Tzadik. And then you have one from the Alter Rebbe that's a little bit relevant partially, and one from the Sheris Yehuda. So if you look, like I told, Samach Tes. Kuf Samach Dalet to Kuf Samach Tes, and Shin Pei Zayin to Shin Tzadik. We start with Siman Kuf Samach Dalet, which is page 177 in your white books. I'm going to go through each tshuva. Some of them have topics which are not directly connected to the siman that we're learning. Some of the topics we're going to discuss, some of them are just going to jump around, depending on what we'll specifically focus on what is relevant to this siman. Kuf Samach Dalet is as follows. There was a get it was a Mokem Migun. The husband was Metzaveh, Sefer, Eidim, Shliach, everything, and left town. Nobody knows where the husband is today. And they wrote the get, etc. The ink wasn't such a great ink, and it splashed around a little bit afterwards. And there are a few problems happened over there. First problem is, the name of the husband is Tzadok. And under the Daled became 4 little dots. One starts right where the Daled starts on the bottom, and the last one ends right where the Daled ends. So you could imagine it will be like a Daled that has these 4 little dots under it, like wrapping the Daled from the bottom. Two tzeiros, one next to another, yeah. It doesn't look like a base, but it might look like a hay with a couple dots in between. They asked the Tinnik to read it. The Tinnik read it as a Daled, not as a hay, and not as a base. Second problem was, the father of the woman's name was Yehuda HaMechune Leib, and the Chaf of HaMechune expanded a little bit, and it looks like a mem. And it could be read as Yehuda HaMemane Leib. The shoyel, the person who asked the question, wanted the svara was, mitzidoy was pasha that you have to write another get. The only question he had was, if we're going to give the 2 גיטין one after another, and we're going to give the second one first, maybe the shliach lehoilacha will become ois shliach by finishing to give the second get, and the first get is no longer going to be a shliach, and also shlichusam. And therefore, maybe that's a problem. Do we say it's a shlichusam or not? Which is a topic which we discussed earlier in the beginning of learning. And the second question that he had, and the second said, maybe just a second get is good enough.
So they wrote a second get?
They didn't write a second get. He asked the Tzemach Tzedek what to do. The Tzemach Tzedek, he asked Tzemach Tzedek, I'm going to write a second get. Could I avoid the problem of giving 2 גיטין? Is there also shlichusam when the second get is given first? Does the first get could they still give the first get? Or maybe just give the second get. What?
They gave already the first get?
No! Nothing was given. They opened it up and now it seems like it. That's the problem. These are the problem. Tzemach Tzedek avoided the whole question. Essentially, write 7 oisias. The first 5 are to make the first get kosher. Only towards the end he goes to discuss about writing the second get. We're not going to discuss about writing the second get. Let's focus on the first 5 oisias. Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dal, and Hey of this tshuva. And the Tzemach Tzedek starts as follows. First, he discusses the letter Daled of Tzaddik, right? That we have 4 little dots on it. Now, just note, Tzemach Tzedek wrote a second tshuva on this. Kuf Samach Hey is also on this a year later, which you're going to get to after we finish Kuf Samach Daled. But let's first deal with this question. The Tzaddik, that the Daled had 4 dots under it. He says, L'chayra, you could compare it to the din of Geflossen, that the Ramah, what's Geflossen? When you have letters, and because of the moisture, the letters expanded on the side, and the Ramah seems to be machshir over there, in Sifta Zayin. And the Get Pashut adds on it, that it's only if a Tinoik reads it properly. But if a Tinoik does not read it properly, if it's in the Tairef, you have to be Chayshish. So over here, being that when you have these dots that happened around the Dalet, you could compare it to Geflossen, because what happens in Geflossen, when you have ink that spreads out, it looks like little spikes coming out of the letter. So instead of having spikes coming out of the letter, you have dots coming out of the letter. And the Tinoik reads it properly, you could be Mekel. And even though, he says, even though the Beis Yosef brings in Siman Lamed Vav and Erechaim that the Marik and the Rivash say, hold that when a letter is not written, when a letter is not written Kitzurah, so the proper Tzurah, then even if a Tinoik reads it, it's possible. So, over here he says, first of all, the Ois is Kitzurah, so the Daled is a Daled. And therefore, even according to Marik and the Rivash, it will be kosher because it's being read properly. It's being properly read as a Daled. Just like if you would add any tagim or something on the letter, it will still be able to be read Ketzurah, so it will still become kosher.
You said it might be like a hey. You said it might be like a hey.
Yeah, but the Daled is clearly there as a Daled. We don't know what it's like. Could be a base, could be a hey, but the Tinoik reads it clearly as a Daled. The Tzurah of the Daled is still there. By Geflossen, you have a Shaila, the Nishtana Tzurah Sois. And over here, the Tzemach Tzedek adds, not only is the no Nishtana Tzurah Sois, the original Daled is still a Daled. It's not Nishtana to Tzurah Sois Acheres. There's a whole discussion if Nishtana means that it no longer looks like the Ois, or that the Ois now looks like a different Ois. Tzemach Tzedek in parentheses throws an interesting comment over here. In this over here, he says, the fact that it's 4 dots and not 2 dots also solves another problem. If it would be 2 dots, maybe somebody would have given attitude that he could read it like a tzedeh, like it's menuked. So they would read the Daled with a tzedeh. So he says, but over here you have 4 dots, and Bechlal, nobody's going to read tzaddik if you have a vav afterwards. So say you have a vav, and say you have 4 dots, so Bechlal don't focus on this nekuda. Which is an interesting point that Tzemach Tzedek brings in. He doesn't mention that, he doesn't bring from the Get Pashut over here, even though he quotes the Get Pashut a lot of times. But we saw the Get Pashut we discussed in last year, that if you have a dot on top of a gimel, that becomes like a gimel or something that changes the kriya, it could become puzzle. So Tzemach Tzedek does acknowledge that there is such a concept. Nekudas could create a problem in certain scenarios, but over here you don't have the problem.
So who writes the gimel l'chayil?
Get Pashut, last year. Look in your notes. From last time, we'll listen to the video. He says nobody's going to read like a tzedeh, and they're going to decide to toe cipher. Yeah. Bechlal, he says, what the Marik and the Rivash says about a Sefer Torah, by a Sefer Torah, niksivotama. By a get, we know you don't niksivotama. Sefer Torah, it says ksav tam, like we also discussed it previously. Ksav tam is 2 words, ksivotama. By a get, it says v'kosav. Because of Bechlal, it's only Sipur Dvarim, Sefer Krisus. So you don't niksivotama. So even though the Marik and the Rivash say that by a get, even by a Sefer Torah, even for Tinik Koire Kahoigen, when it's the Oish is not properly written, then it's possible when it comes to a get, you don't have this issue because get does not require Ksivotama. And therefore Tzemach Tzedek concludes in this part of the Tzemach Tzedek, that being that there is no real shinui over here, and it wasn't nishtana tzura, and it wasn't nishtana to a tzura of a different ois, and the Tinoik read it properly, therefore you could be meiko. However, comes the question, should we leave it as is or should we erase it? So that comes to Machzedek Nois Beis, and he says that still, lechatchila, you should erase those 4 dots. Just like the Mechaber writes in Siman Kuf Chavav, which you didn't learn yet, which you're going to learn down the line, regarding when what we did mention in the past, regarding if the foot of the hay touches the gag. If the foot of the hay touches the gag, that even though you could say in certain scenarios it's kosher, the Beis says it's better you should erase it. And so Tzemach Tzedek says, go take a look in what the Alter Rebbe writes about letters which are touching each other, but Greda, about scraping, erasing between letters that touch each other. Where does the Alter Rebbe write about this? In Siman Shas Teshuvos, Siman Lamed Vav, which is page 89 in your white book. So you're going to be flipping back and forth. Yeah. What was the story in the Tshuva of the Alter Rebbe? We're going to go into it because Tzemach Tzedek only says, look in the Tshuva of the Alter Rebbe and brings 1 point from it. The story over there was a get that came from the city of Amchislav to Dubravne. And there were letters which touched each other. Probably with the traveling, the letters expanded and touched each other. And some letters, Bichlal, were already not so the Nishtana Atzura. The shape of the letter changed. And it looks like it's geflossen. That means that the letters expanded because of the moisture. However, all the shilas were in the toifus, not in the toirif. And what was the story over there by the Alter Rebbe? It was also a mokim migun. It was also the husband left town, and it was very hard to get this get. And the Alter Rebbe over there says that regarding erasing the dveikus, the Alter Rebbe explained something which we learned, but we didn't discuss Alter Rebbe yet. And that is in this Siman, in Kuf Chafei and Sivav, the Ramah gives you the conditions of when you could be goyter the dveikus. He says you have to do 3 things. It's Shas Adchak, and before the Chsima Sa'idim, and Tzivui Abal. Over here, you have only 1 out of the 3. It's after Chsima Sa'idim. It's not Tzivui Abal, but it's Shas Adchak. So Alter Rebbe is mechadish as follows: the Ramah is not talking about the mokim migun. The Ramah is talking about the Shas Adchak. What's the Shas Adchak over there? It's before the get is written, before the get is signed, obviously, and the husband is still there. That's why the Ramah mentions the husband Tzivui Abal and before Chsima. So what's the Shas Adchak? Financial Shas Adchak. The Eidim have to leave. It's going to cost a lot more money to keep them there. They're going to lose money because they have to catch a train somewhere or a boat to go for business, or it's going to cost them more. So then the Ramah says, in such a scenario, that's a Shas Adchak. And over there, you need it should be before the Eidim sign, and it should be with Tzivui Abal. But if you cannot write another get, so you don't have the Tzivui Abal available, and you don't have the Kodim Chsima Sa'idim because you don't have the Eidim anymore, it's a mokim migun, you could give it as is. The Alter Rebbe says, just like the Ramah writes in Darkei Moshe and Sifkot Nevav. If you look in the Ramah clearly writes it. In the Ramah on Shulchan Aruch is machmer, in Darkei Moshe he brings the option that it's makel. However, the Alter Rebbe says, still in all, you should, since you could fix it through greda, through scraping, you should fix it, even though you could give it as is, according to the Ramah, in such a scenario. And who should fix it? The Bezdin.
So, the Alter Rebbe says that you should scrape it.
Yes. And who should do it? The Bezdin, without Tzivui Abal. Why? He brings from the Rosh, that the Tur brings, that Mistame, the husband, when he was mitzvah to write a get, wanted it Ketikun Chazal. This is in the Tur, the Tur in the end of Siman Kuf Chavav. The Tur we mentioned already previously also. That he says that the husband, when he appoints, he wants to do it Ketikun Chazal. And if the Sefer didn't properly write it, he would be happy that it would be fixed Ketikun Chazal. So, when the Bezin fixes it, they are the Shulchim of the Baal to fix it. And Bichlal, the Alter Rebbe says you don't need Shluchas for Ksiva. Mamash, you don't need Mamash Shluchas. Because v'kosav is really medin of lishma, which you also already know. And especially over here, you don't even have to get into the discussion if v'kosav is lishma or v'kosav is medin shlichus, because over here, each letter was written properly and lishma, l'shem gerushin. And what happened afterwards? Because of traveling, it got attached. So when you're going to scrape the geflossen, you're not canceling the lishma and the lishma that happened originally. The lishma is still there. The letters were the get was written lishma.
Now you're discussing a separate issue. Shlichus you only lishma.
No, because v'kosav is lishma. If it's not shlichus, it's mitzad lishma. So obviously you have to have lishma. So he tells you it's mitzad over here, because it was written for sure lishma. So that's why, in addition to the fact that the husband wants the bezdin wants the get to be written properly, over here the get was written properly, and every letter was written lishma. So even if lu yitzur you would need a tzivui abal mitzad lishma, you would only need it. You don't need it over here because the letters were written lishma. That's essentially what the Alter Rebbe says, and that's what the Tzemach Tzedek points out over here. The Tzemach Tzedek says, adds onto the Alter Rebbe, back to the Tzemach Tzedek. Tzemach Tzedek adds onto the Alter Rebbe, and Tzemach Tzedek says that even according to those that hold it that v'kosav is medin shlichus, you don't have a problem to have the bezdin, somebody to do the scraping of the dveikus of the letters which are attached without the minui of the Baal. Why? Because these dveikus, these attachments, and in our scenario, these dots were not done by the Sefer. It was done mimela because of the schlepping and travel, or because of the moisture. So therefore, if it's medin lishma, you don't have a problem, because it was properly written lishma. And if it's medin shlichus, taka, maybe you can't fix it, but it's kosher without it. If it's kosher without it, if the letters are still recognized, but it's kosher without it. So even if it's medin shlichus, the get would be kosher. The only difference between the v'kosav medin shlichus or v'kosav medin lishma is whether you could fix it, whether we should be able to do the greater or not. And he says even more so, even according to those that hold that it's medin shlichus, you still have a svara, and that is according to the shittas hasmak, which we saw in different places, which we also discussed previously. The smak writes regarding a sefer Torah that if you have a letter and the tipas diyoi falls in the halal, in the empty space under the letter, you could erase it. Why? Because the ois nasa ketikunai. The ois was already done and was already written properly. And then you had a drop of ink that fell. And all you're doing is you're removing something which was there previously. And therefore, Tzemach Tzedek says that to remove these four little dots under the dal is mutar l'kuli alma. But in Eis Gimel, he goes and starts discussing it as follows. He says, the Pri Chodesh brings the name of the Radach, that the Radach is talking about in Sefer Torah, that if you have a letter, and you have a little spitz coming out of the letter, a koitz coming out of the letter, and it doesn't change the tzuras ha'ois, and it's recognized to a tinaik, you could fix it. But only if it doesn't touch the letter. But when you touch it, it goes into a shaila of chak teiches. If a dot falls,
when does it not go into shaila? When does it go into shaila of chak teiches?
When it touches. If you're going to erase it, you could erase it if a tina kere kahoigen and a lo nishtan netzuras ha'ois. But if it's actually touching, then you have a problem with chak teiches. And he says, the Chalkas Mechaykin, the Beshmul, the Levush, and others are all chelik on it. So we have the majority are mekel. And the Tzemach Tzedek says, but Doch the Alter Rebbe in Siman Lamed Vav in Orach Chaim paskins like the Radach regarding the letters. Tzemach Tzedek really points out, he says, even though the Alter Rebbe paskins like the Radach, when it's a get and it's a Mokim Igun, you could go against that and you could paskin like the Mekilim. Why? For two reasons. A, they're the Rabbim, they're the majority, versus the minority who are Machmir. And they're Basroi, they came after the Radach, so they saw what the Radach wrote. So for two reasons, and plus it's a Mokim Igun, so even though the Alter Rebbe paskin like the Radach, you could be Mekel against it. And even those who are Machmir, in general, in such a scenario, will be Mekel b'Mokim Igun. If the Tinoik reads it properly. And over here, the Tinoik read it properly. And then, even the Machmirim would be Mekel, that the get is kosher even without Mechika. And they're without erasing these little dots. And therefore, if you do erase the dots, it's fine. And with that, the Tzemach Tzedek concludes the first question, which is the Tzaddik question. But now we have a second problem, and that is Hamechune became Hamemune or Hamemane, because the Chaf now looks a little bit like a Mem. And the Tzemach Tzedek first says it will be for sure be kosher b'diavad. Why? Because even if the letter is, because if you would, let's say, because you would eliminate the words Hamechune from the get. You just read Yehuda Leib when you're supposed to read Yehuda Hamechune Leib. It would be still kosher b'diavad. Even though people might make a mistake and say that Yehuda, that the person is called Yehuda Leib and really is not called Yehuda Leib, it's called Yehuda Hamechune Leib. Still no, it's kosher b'diavad, like the Beis Yosef writes in Siman Kuf Chav Tes, and like the Alter Rebbe writes in his Tשובות. And then Tzemach Tzedek goes to the whole discussion about Shinui Hashem, or Shina Shmoi, or not Shina Shmoi. I'm not going to get into it right now. And that's what the Tzemach Tzedek goes in Ois Dal. And then Ois Hey, Tzemach Tzedek goes back to dealing with the Smak. Yep, because the Smak we mentioned before, and the Smak comes a few times up in Scientist Tשובות, say B'chlal, because Smak has an interesting shit when it comes to this. And what does the Smak say? That if it was done, the letter was written kesikonoi, and then afterwards a drop of ink fell, so you could erase it, right? That's what we mentioned before. And Tzemach Tzedek says, mashma from the Smak, that it makes no difference if the husband was mitzaveh or not. However, Tzemach Tzedek says, lav dafka, you could say that the shit of the Smak becomes a klal, that you could always be maker, because ultimately it's the issue of chak teiches. So therefore he says, being that over here you don't have the issue of chak teiches, because the dot is not touching the goof of the letter, and the letter was written properly with the tzivui of the husband, and only afterwards it became a problem. So then you could be mesaken even without tzivui abal. Sai according to the Smak, and Sai according to the Rashba, who's usually Machmer, and other ones. And especially says, since this is not a tipas dioi shenaflo. Tipas dioi shenaflo, after the letter was written and changes the letter. Here it's about, it looks like oisias shenidbeku, like letters which got attached. Yeah, but he says you shouldn't be medame to nafla tipas dioi, which changes the tzura of the ois from the sefer nafla tipas dioi. Rather, it should be nizdame to nidbeku, that each letter was properly written, and afterwards it was nidbeku. And when nidbeku, the Beis Yosef says lechatchila, you could be goyder the dveikus.
I don't understand. There's two things. There's a tibla touching a letter, and then there's two letters are touching.
Yeah.
And then there's also two things that there's a difference if
Tipa nafla touching, if the tipa is touching or tipa is not touching. Yeah. So he says over here by hamechune hamemune, it's not a din of a tipas dioi shenafla and changed the letter from chaf to mem. So doesn't go into that category of the chak teiches shaila. It's rather in the category of dveikus, of two letters which touched each other. Why is that? Because
fell later.
Yeah, what happened over here? How did hamechuna become hamemuna or hamemana? Because after the chaf comes a vav, and the chaf expanded for moisture, or whatever it is, and it touched, it kissed the vav now. So now it became hamemana.
But two letters are touching, doesn't make a difference if the two letters are touching in a way that makes a new ice, or if it's just two letters are touching that don't make a new ice?
It does, but over here it's mitzad geflos and lav dafka that it didn't touch it fully. He says, look at it as two letters which are touching, and over there the Beis Yosef writes in Kuf Chaf Hey, the Mechaber writes in Kuf Chaf Hey, that you could be greater than dveikus. That over there, the Beis Yosef, and from the Beis Yosef it's mashma, even if it's nishtana to a tzura of a different ice. And obviously those are cholik on the Mechaber, and the one the Mechaber is basing himself on. So the Tzemach Tzedek says, okay, no, so the worst that could happen is that we're going to say that this letter is as if it wasn't written over there. This word is as if the hamechone is not written over there, right? Because that's what we mentioned before. He says, okay, let's say that by you erasing the connection between the chaf and the vav to make it into hamechune, it's a tikkun that you weren't supposed to do. It's not chak teiches or for whatever other reason. So you didn't do a ksiva, you didn't write hamechune, but you avoided a different problem. What's the problem you avoided? That people are going to think that his name is Hamemane, Yehuda Hamemane Leib. Second name, whatever, today Israelis give interesting names. Maybe then also. So, and that would be Shinui Shmo is a big problem. Shinui Shem could be placed to the get. Over here, by you creating a chak teiches, what you're doing is, it's this word hamechune is no longer ksiva. There's no ksiva over here. So it's as if it's not there. But you got rid of the problem of Shino Shmoi.
So you left it with the leg, and the leg is not about.
Yeah.
So he says to erase hamechune?
No, to erase the chaf between the chaf and the vav, and to make it back into chaf vav hamechune. And he says, and even this one, like before, this also doesn't need tzivui abal. Why doesn't this one need tzivui abal? Because the attachment between the chaf and the vav was not done by tzivui abal. So the separation is not going to be done by tzivui. It doesn't have to be done by tzivui abal either. What is it like? It's a Tzedek says, if somebody's writing a sefer, is writing a get by tzivui abal, comes some random guy, and the sefer is in the middle of writing, and he adds a word into it. The guy's name is Yosef, and he sticks in after Yosef, Shimon. And the sefer gets all mad when he sees it, and he erases it. Does that make the get puzzle? No. Why not? The husband didn't ask for it, even if the sefer didn't erase it. Somebody else erased it, Bezdin erased it. Someone added in, and someone else deleted it. The sefer wasn't the one who put it in, the sefer wasn't the one who took it out. Still be kosher. Why? And it's no issue of Shinui Shmei or anything of the sort. Why? Because the person who put it in is not appointed by the husband, the person who took it out is not appointed by the husband. So therefore, the person who took it out it doesn't have to be appointed by the husband. Same thing over here. The dots were not there, not the dots. The dibuk, the attachment between the chaf and the vav to make it the hamechune into hamemane or hamemune was not done by the husband. Was not done b'tzivui habal. It was actually done b'tzivui habal was done properly. So the separation also has to be done b'tzivui habal. It was done b'meila. And therefore the get does not become puzzle. And then in Eis Vav he goes into the whole discussion whether you could write a second get, you can't write a second get, etc. And that's and his maskana is that it's mutter. Yeah, but I'm not going to go into the second get, into the whole discussion of a second get. Siman Kuf Samachei is a hemshech to Siman Kuf Samach Dalet. And over here the Tzemach Tzedek says, you asked me about what I wrote last year, or you asked me what I wrote a year ago, and this is, I'm going to answer you what we discussed then. What was the question then? what was the new question that he asked on it? He says, we have a hay with 4 dots. Maybe if I erased 1 dot of the 4, and now maybe after I erased 1 or 2 dots, if I would give it now to a tinnik to see, to look, it would look like a hay. Maybe he would read like a hay. And that's what the shoyel asks. And maybe taka would have been like a hay. The tinnik would have read it wrongfully. But poil, it's not. He says, but poil, the sharav shoyel, it's a suffix rochik. But I have a bigger suffix connected to it. What is it? That if a taka would become a hay, not that I would ask a tinnik, if a taka maybe would become a hay with less than 4 dots, and I would erase it, now it becomes chok teiches, and it's without tzivui abal. Why is it chok teiches? Because if you take a hay and you convert it into a dal, it becomes chok teiches. And that's where the Tzemach Tzedek begins, and he says, let's first go into the discussion of chok teiches. Let's not jump into the story of the get. Let's first discuss chok teiches. This is a longer tshuva than the previous one. And there's a chok teiches, which is what case of chok teiches? When you have a drop of ink that falls into the halal of a dalet and becomes a hay. And so Tzedek goes through different opinions. Says, first of all, we have the Goyes Maminius, who brings the name of Ri, that mechike, the erasing is not going to help, because this letter has the name of a hay. Right now, it's called a hay. And by you erasing the dot, now it's called a dalet. And how did it change from a hay to a dalet? Through your erasing. That is chok teiches. And he says, that's how Sefer Truma paskins. That's first Sefer Truma, Agoyes Maminius. Second opinion is a smak, which we already know. That if it was the Nasek Tikuna, and then the dot falls in the space over there, B'chol not a chashash of pasul. And he says, and that's the mashmos of the Rashba in the Tshuvas HaMiyuchasos LaRamban, which we also discussed in the previous year. That's how the Beis Yosef understood the Rashba, and that's how the Radach understood the Rashba. And Tzemach Tzedek says, and even though the Get Pashut disagrees on the Radach's understanding in the Rashba, Tzemach Tzedek says, if you look in other places in the Rashba, Chidushi Rashba, it's clear like the smak. It's clear like it's clear like the smak. And even though, it's clear like a Sefer Truma. And even though the mashmos of the Rashba and Chidushim is that it's even, that you're allowed to fix it even when the letter was not done kesikuna, so he's even more mekel in the Sefer Truma. From the Tshuvas, it's mashma that it's only like the Sefer Truma. Only if it's nice.
One second. The Sefer Truma is more machmir. Sefer Truma is more machmir.
I mean, like a smak, not Sefer Truma, like a smak, yeah. The Chidush Yarashba, it's mashma like the smak, not like in the Tshuvas. In the Tshuvas, it's mashma that Chidushim, it's mashma even more. So in the Tshuvas, it's mashma only for Nasik Sikuna, then you could fix it. Then Tzemach Tzedek says the Ran goes and disagrees with the Rashba. The Ran was a Talmud of the Rashba, and puts a couple questions on the Rashba. And the Panim Michalshu is Panim Meiros Farent for the Kasha of the Ran on the Rashba. Yeah. And then he says the Get Pashut brings that the Kol Boy Paskin La Halacha like the Smak. That's mutter. And that Tzemach Tzedek says, and even though La Halacha we do not paskin like the Smak, still in all you could use them to be metzarefet to other sfeikus. It's like we know we have one suffix, we have more than one suffix. You could at least use a Smak as a tziruf for other sfeikus. You could be mekel. Elamai Tzemach Tzedek says you're going to want to come and say there's machlekes haposkim, and therefore it should be a suffix shakul one way or the other. It's not so. Why? Because Roiv haposkim hold not like the smak, that it's motoroi b'paiskim or machmer like a sefer atruma, and therefore it doesn't become a suffix shakul that you could say suffix one way or the other, and therefore we come to a problem. If it's a suffix, we have to know if it's a deiraisa or derabanan, because the base mayor clearly writes that chak teiches is only a suffix, in this case only a suffix midrabanan. And not a suffix, it's only asur midrabanan, and by a get. The get pashut has a suffix if it's asur midrabanan or asur midiraisa. So even if you want to be machmir, like the Sefer HaTruma, you can't say that the Sefer, you can't be machmir that like a Sefer HaTruma that it's for sure chak teiches. It's only a suffix. And if it, because ultimately Sefer Truma, these people disagree with him. It is a suffix. Who do we pass like? And we also have a suffix, if it's midiraisa or not. And that's how Tzedek leaves that hanging in Ois Gimel, and we'll get back to it later. That's how Tzedek says, let's go now in Ois Daled and deal with the shit of the Sefer Truma, which is machmir, and says it's chak teiches, and see if we could work within the Sefer Truma to be machshir it also. What's the shit of the Sefer HaTruma? Before, when you had a dalid, which had a dot in it, it has a shem, a toyar ois hey. So therefore, by you erasing it and converting it to a toyar ois dalid, shem ois dalid, you create issue chak teiches. In this case, the Machzedek says, even before the erasing, it did not have a toyar, a shem of a ois hey. It was still being read by the tinnik as a dalid. So therefore, before erasing the dots, all the dots were still there. It was still a tayar of Ois Dalet. Still called a Dalet. It was called a Dalet with some additional damage around it. Elamai, you created a suffix that maybe after it was a Dalet with 4 dots. And now, after I erased one of the dots, maybe the tinnik is going to now say, hey, maybe it now looks like a hey.
Because there's 4 dots, if you erased 3 dots and you only left with 1 dot, it would look like a...
That maybe, according to Sefer Truma, might have been a problem, yeah? But the question is, when was it, it didn't have a toyar ois hey before you started erasing. It had a toyar ois dalet, and it remained a toyar ois dalet. So he says, being that it only had a toyar ois dalad all along, even if a tinnik would make a mistake and read it as a hey, it would still be kosher. Why? Because we see that it has a toyar dalad and it remains a toyar dalad. And we do not pay attention to a tinnik in such a scenario, because it was written kasikunai, and it has a toyar of ois dalad. And as the Machzedek says, and I already explained to you in the previous tshuva, that it's not considered a psul in the actual letter when you have some dots that could go around it. Why? Because it does not look like another letter. Before, when is it a shaila? When it switches from looking like one letter to looking like another letter. Over here, these 4 dots or 3 dots did not make it look like a hey. It still remained looking like a dalet. And therefore, even according to the Sefer HaTruma, being that when all the 4 dots were there, it was clearly considered a dalet, and it was not changed to any ois acheres, and there was no tayar of another ois on it. Therefore, we're not mischashev bichlal in the das atinaik, in what the tinik says, the kriyas atinaik. We don't care what the tinik says if he reads it like a hey, because it doesn't have the tayar of a hey or the tayar of a dalet. And therefore, that's how we're even going to say Matrim will be kosher. Elamai, because Nachzek says we have a much bigger problem. Maybe it's b'chlal pasuk midiraisa. Okay, batal midiraisa, or pasuk midirabban. What is this based on? The halacha that the Rambam writes in Hilchos Gerushin, Perek Daled, halacha tes onwards, that you have to have a clear ksav, not crooked. So much so that the Ketanim could read it. And not that it should have a shinui mashmos. And if it had a shinui mashmos, the get is possible. Midrabanan. Right? That's the mashmos in Hilchos Gerushin. So if the Ketanim cannot read the letter properly, only the Gdolim, that means Lu Yitzur, that the Tinnik would read it as a hey, but we Gdolim know that it's a Daled, maybe it's possible.
Didn't you say the Tinnik reads it like a Daled, as long as there's 4 dots?
Yeah, but he says, the Shiloh of the Rav was, when I erased some of the dots, maybe it started looking like a hey, and the Tinnik would have read it like a hey. So first of all, according to the wouldn't be a problem if Tinnik reads it like a hey, because it never changed a Toyar of those Dalet from it. So we don't care about the Tinnik.
No, but you said if he erases the first 3 first, then it did change. It became a hey right now. That second became hey.
Yeah, but it had a Toyar Dalet from before. I mean, it was not like a dot fell and it got a new Toyar. I was in the middle of erasing it. I erased 1, I erased 2, I erased 3. The Rav said maybe if I erased 1, the Tinnik would be able to read it, huh?
I mean, when you have 4 dots that fall, the fair makes sense that one of them fell first, and then you can say that it really did only have, was only a for a certain period.
Question is, where did it fall from?
Okay, but that's a question that you can have.
Right, so that's why he comes now, and the question that he says is, could be that you have over here, you're going to have a scenario that a Tinnik would have read it like a hey, whether it's 1 dot or 2 dots or 3 dots or 4 dots, and you would have a problem, according to the Rambam, that in Hilchos Gitin he says it's possible, and you could even say that it's batel midiraisa. Why? Why would you say it's batel midiraisa? Because we first have to understand why by ksav okum it's only possible midrabanan. Tzemach Tzedek says the reason why by crooked ksav it's only possible midrabanan is because the Tinnik, the lashon of the Rambam is the Tinnik is in a koirei heitev, doesn't read it well, so it's not clearly read. So therefore, it's possible midrabanan. But if the Tinnik clearly reads it like a hey, because for whatever reason you have the dot there, or you have 2 dots there, and the Tinnik decided that it's a hey with an extra dot, it's more strict than akum. It shouldn't be possible. It should be batel midiraisa. And in Hilchos Teres, Mashma from the Rambam is taka batel midiraisa. In Hilchos Gerushin it says possible. In Hilchos Teres, Mashma is taka batel. So taka, so he says no, but he says ultimately we still have. You can't bring a raya from Hilchos Sefer Torah. It's no Dalet. Tzemach Tzedek says, because why can't you bring a raya from Sefer Torah? Same, we discussed it a few times. Sefer Torah has to be ksivot tama, and therefore by a Sefer Torah it could become batel. But a get doesn't need ksivot tama, so therefore nothing by a get of this sort that's an issue mitzad ksivot tama would make it batel. The most you could do is make it possible midrabanan. But this is not enough. Just because it's possible midrabanan, it's not enough of a reason to be mekel. Can't suddenly be mekel and mokim igun and give a get that's possible midrabanan. Huh? No. Midrabanan, it's not nikra kahoigen, like the ksiva that's crooked. So we have a chak teiches before that suffik deraisa suffik derabanan. Or all this is all that's discussing the shittas hamachmirim, because we have the majority. We have a bunch of shittas that disagree with the. We have the smak that disagrees with it, but they're the minority. So you can't just take the minority and just roll with them. You have to deal with the majority. So first he explains that maybe we call it mischashav in the Tinnik. Now he discusses the shit of the Rambam. Maybe you could say it's batel, but really he says you can't say it's batel. Most you could say it's possible. But even if you say it's possible, this reason enough to say that there's not enough to be machshir the get. Can't be machshir the get. It's possible with the Rabbanon. You need another sniff. You need other sniffim. So therefore, in Ois Hey, it's a Tzedek says. But we have here all the sniffim. What are all the sniffim that we have? We already mentioned 3. Tzemach Tzedek says the first one is the letter did not change to become a hey. It's the first svara. that ein lo nishtanet tzurasi with the 4 dots, it never had the toyar of a hey and it had the toyar of a dalet. So therefore, to say that we have a chashash, maybe the tinuk would have not read it like a dalet is a far-fetched chashash. Second reason being that the adults read it like a dalet, and we know it's a dalet. Lo nishtanet, the shame ois from hey to dalet. Therefore, we should. The adults know that it's a dalet. The second reason that explains according to Sefer Truma. We know that it's a tayar dalet. According to Sefer Truma, it didn't get the shame ois hey, the tayar ois hey. It still has a tayar ois dalet with some dirt in it. So the most is going to be is a psuma de rabbanon. But being if the tinuk would have read it like a hey, but we don't know if the tinuk would have read it like a hey. Well, maybe the tinuk would have read it like a hey. So it became a sofek midrabanan. And to attach to that, you have the smak. Shittas smak. The smak that we know already what the smak is. That it was written meikarik kedin. It was written from mechatchil. It was written properly. And even if it becomes possible afterwards, it doesn't remain. The erasing only returns the status of the letter to what it was before. So therefore, we have a three svaras, and therefore, with connecting all 3 together that he explained until now, we could be machshir the get, and you could erase the dots without the husband's opinion. Why? Because like we said before in the previous tshuva, because only removing a kilkul which was not done by the husband or by his appointment, and even if you say it because it was medin shlichus, it's not a problem according to the smak. Because according to the smak, you only bringing back what originally was.
Even without smak, even with all the statements, use all the statements.
Huh?
You use all the statements to.
Yeah.
Then you don't need to be about.
You don't need to be about, yeah. However, Tzemach Tzedek says that this all will only work take only if it did not change to look like another letter. But because according to the smak, it's only if when's nikar ma'aser, because the smak just says if it's nikar ma'aser, if it's your machzer, you return it lekadmusa to what it was before. It was a daled, it became now it became a hey, but the original daled is still visible, and therefore you are just revealing what was there before. However, nikar, the ma'aser of the first one is nikar. But if the dot fell in such a way that the original dalet is no longer recognizable, Tzemach Tzedek says that even according to the smak, l'cha'ira, his svara would not work. Maybe it would not work. However, even according to those who are machmer, Tzemach Tzedek says we have another svara to be meikel. That's an oizvav. Another sniff, in addition to the 3 that you mentioned before. That even if you're going to say that Tinoik read it like a hey, would read it like a hey, and not like a daled. And erasing it would not work because it's chok teiches. And it would be a chak teiches midiraisa. It still helps that it's no longer what it was before. This is we mentioned in the previous tshuva regarding hamechuna. Here he's mentioning it regarding tzaddik, which is even bigger because hamechuna is only between Yehuda and Leib, as if it doesn't exist. Over here it's regarding tzaddik. He says, what's the issue over here? It would become as if he didn't write his name bichlal. Because if we leave it there, if we say it's a hey, then we have a problem with shino shmoi. It's a hoik. Shino in the shem. We're going to say it's not the megarish. But if you erase it, through chak teiches it became tzaddik. So therefore tzaddik is not written, because it's not ksiva. So it's as if tzaddik is not there, but for sure it's not tzahoik. There's no tzahoik anymore, so there's no shino shmoi. no shinui in the Shem. The most that there is that the tzaddik disappeared. It became a tzaddik through chak teiches, and now that tzaddik is as if it's not there anymore. So it's no longer tzaddik, it's just Ben, his father's name. And when you don't write the name, you only write Ben, the father's name. The Beis Yosef brings an extreme machlokes. One says it's kosher, and one says batel midiraisa. And the get Pashat says it's Safek Megureshes, the Beis Meir also says it's Safek Megureshes. And we have the Maram Padva who holds that if the father has no other sons, it is kosher. He has no other sons, because then Ben Yosef would be, everybody knows it's one. And you have also the Rashba who's in the middle who says only midrabanan and not midiraisa. So when you have this, you have the svara of the Beis Yosef, when you have the svara of the that it's as if it's no longer in existence. It became as if there's no Shem over there. It's only Ben Pliny. And you have the Beis Yosef who brings shittas that say that it's kosher. And you have the Rashba that says it's only posel midrabanan. And you have the Maram Padva that says that sometimes it could be kosher. So if you add this fourth suffix to the previous three that you mentioned before, you can be machshir the get completely, and the Beis Din should correct the 4 dots, and that's it. And in Zayin and Ches, he goes again into the whole discussion, he goes into the whole arichas into why you don't need tzivui abal, and since we already discussed it in the previous one, we're not going to have to go into it again. I'm going to move to Siman Kuf Samach Vav, which is, we'll call it part of a 3 tshuva package. You have Kuf Samach Vav, you have a tshuva of the Sheres Yehuda, and you have a tshuva Shin Pei Ches of the Tzemach Tzedek. And that's the order that it seems like they occurred. First the Tzemach Tzedek wrote the tshuva, then the Sheres Yehuda probably responded or discussed it with the Tzemach Tzedek, and then Shin Pei Ches is like a later summary of the tshuva that the Tzemach Tzedek wrote, because in Shin Pei Ches he mentions that the Ma'aril already responded on this matter. What was the story? And this Kuf Samach Vav is a tshuva we're going to be discussing in other 2 places, in 2 other shiurim also, but in the future, but not now. It was a get of a mumar. A get of a mumar, first he did zikui to his wife. He gave it to somebody, he says, Chei beget ze leishti. And then he took it back, and then he appointed the zoiche to be the shlech leilach. And there is no, and he appointed it, and then the shliach lehilacha took it and brought it to the other city where the wife is. There's a bunch of problems in the get. 5 problems. Only 2 of them are relevant to the simon. There's only 2 we're going to be discussing. What's the first problem that there is? All the bases in the get don't have a square top. The bases have a rounded top, like in print. In the printing, most fonts, especially the traditional fonts, the Vilna and the Amsterdam fonts, and all those fonts are rounded. The top of the base is rounded. It's not squared. And to make it all worse, the name of the woman is Rivka, and the base by Rivka was read as such. They asked a bunch of Tinaikas. All of them read it as base, except for one who read it as chaf and then said on a base.
Oh, the round on the bottom, not the top.
Top.
So how is it read as chaf?
Go ask the Tinnik, not me, I have no idea. So the Tzemach Tzedek responds as follows. He says, first of all, look in the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch Siman Lamed Vav regarding the letter base. What does the Alter Rebbe over there write? Alter Rebbe writes, Al pi hasoid, you have to square it. It comes from the Baruch Shamar. And Alter Rebbe over there in Beshula and Betzidei Agilion writes, it's in the print, it's in the footnotes, that according to the Rosh and the Tur, the difference between a chaf and a base is only on the bottom, that the base is an extension. And not that the top is squared, obviously, because that's not meant. And Alter Rebbe just leaves it like that. So the Tzemach starts with that. The Alter Rebbe says Al Pi Asad that look in Alter Rebbe. You look in Alter Rebbe, you see that Al Pi Asad you have to square it, but then in the side Alter Rebbe writes that it's mashma from the looks of the Rosh and the Tur. The difference is only in the bottom, not in the top. And he brings also the Baruch Shamar, which is the source that Al Pi Asad you have to square the base. And the lashon of the Baruch Shamar is very sharp. The Beis Yosef brings the Baruch Shamar, and he says a soifrim burim amaratzim, which write a base which is not squared on top. And the Baruch Shamar says maybe these burim think that being that on the bottom the base extends, so it's no longer like a chaf, so it's fine. So the Tzemach Tzedek says you have. The Alter Rebbe writes about the Rosh and the Torah, and you have what the Baruch Shamar says that the Burim have Epsasvara, but they're still Burim. So regarding a get, you could be Mekel, and more so. He says you should be able to make it similar to the din of Nidbeku Ragli Ahei, by a kuf. By a hay and by a kuf, that it went up a little bit and it touched, the Mechaber says it's kosher, b'mokim igun, if a Tinnik reads it properly. The Pri Chodesh disagrees with the Mechaber regarding that halacha of nidbeku ragli ahei, but the Get Poshet says no, we still follow the Mechaber. And he says, Mashma from the Beis Shmuel and Chalkas Mechagik, also that you could be matir. And even more so over here, you're not talking about a get that's going to be given to her. You're talking about a get that she was already zoiche boy. So upon him, you could consider it like a get that was already given. And then the Tzemach Tzedek goes back and says, I did mention to you that the Pri Chodesh disagrees with the Mechaber. But the Pri Chodesh brings a raya to it from Ilchas V'Teira. And Ilchas V'Teira are irrelevant to Ilchas Gitin according to the Mechaber. Because the Mechaber is the one that says, by Sefer Teira you have Ksivotama. By a get you don't need Ksivotama. So therefore it's fine. But the Tzemach Tzedek says, just be careful over here. This case, the Bezdin should not fix the bases. Leave the bases as is. Why? The Tinnik reads them like it's proper. And it's kosher b'di'evid. And by you squaring off the letters, you could create a much bigger problem than by you leaving them as is. It doesn't explain what the problem is. He says, by scraping between the letters, that the Alter Rebbe says it's better if you scrape them, is one thing of the taka, and he doesn't explain why, but that's what the Mechaber clearly writes that that you could be goyder the letters which became attached together, and by nidbeku he just says leave it. And the chayre the svara is because a tikkun nidbeku is a by nidbeku you don't lav dafka that you don't need the tzivui abal, and you don't need tzivui abal because the letters are written kesikunam. When you're fixing a letter which was not written 100% kesikuna, even though it's being read kesikunai properly, you're going to a shaila if maybe you do need tzivui abal or not. Now the Maril also addresses this question. Where's the Maril? The Maril is in Shas Tshuvas Sheiris Yehuda Even Ezer Siman Yud Beis, which is in page 113 in your white books. And he discusses this question, and that is an Ois Aleph of his tshuva, of the Sheiris Yehuda. What is the tshuva? What does he says? Over there he says like this. He says, well, the Alter Rebbe mentions the Rosh and the Tur, and it's clear that the Alter Rebbe's point was to show you that the Alter Rebbe understood according to the Rosh and the Tur that you don't have to square off the top of the base. And that you have to, what the Rosh and the Tur says, that you have to be merabeya, the tag of the base, it's referring to the bottom of the base. That you have to make sure the bottom is properly there. And therefore, he says, since the ribua on top is only al pisoid and not medina, and bichlal, you look in Sefer Teres that the Sfada should write in Ksav Velish, and you see that they bichlal not makpid on squaring the top of the base, and that's how it is in print. He says in Oisius Atfus, you see also that the top of the base is rounded. So, but the you don't have to be makpid on this. That was the first issue with this get. No. In the Shin Pei Ches, the Tzemach summarizes the tshuva. It doesn't address the matter. He continues. Why should he respond to him? He just added one more svara, one more reason to him. Then back to the Tzemach Tzedek. You have there's another 4 problems in the get. We'll skip the second one. We'll go to the third one. The third problem in the get was that in the words Yisichi Lichi, the chaf was not properly rounded. So while they made the bases round, the chafs, they didn't properly round it. And some of the children read it as a base, not as a chaf. They read it as libi, my heart. And some read it as a chaf, Yisichi Lichi. So he starts by saying, Taka, we have the Maram Lublin who holds that when you have a tinnik that reads partially, when some tinnikas read partially like one letter and some tinnikas read like a different letter, it's puzzle. But the get pasha doesn't say so. The get pasha disagrees with him when it comes to a get. Other people hold like him. It's like mentions the Maram Lublin as the one. The people, he says the get pasha is not mashaga. So that's the first reason why ultimately you have a few which read it properly. Bechlal, Yisichi Lichi is in the Teifus, not in the Teirif. And we're not going to get into it now, but if you miss one word in the Teifus, the get is still kosher. And that's the whole long thing that if you miss one word in the Teifus, it's still kosher. And that's the Machzedek says, and even if it's taka read like a base, and they'll read it like libi, which is lashon chavivus, so like, my love. Still, he writes. Not Yisichi Lichi, Ptaris. It's over there, it says Ptaris. So he says, I'm divorcing you even though I love you. But it doesn't change the mashmos of the get. The chaf to the base, calling it libi, just says, okay, so he loves her and he still divorces her. The mashmos of the get doesn't change. So even if it would be a base in the Teifus, it wouldn't be a problem. And in the Sheiris Yehuda, who he also discusses in this, in his Ois Gimel, which is page 114, says that Bichlal, in these things, the Kpeda is only L'chatchila. Why? Because you cannot understand it in any other way that is contradicting the understanding of the get. And Bechal, he says, all these issues are only if the husband is ma'arid, according to many poskim. And over here, the husband is not ma'arid. And especially if you have the first Yisichi Lichi was probably written properly, or the last one was written properly. So then, if one in the middle of the three, one of the Lichis in the three was messed up, it's still kosher. And especially if it's a teif, it's not in the teif. Yeah. That is the 2 questions in this tshuva that are relevant. So we move to Kuf Samach Zayin in the Tzemach Tzedek. And Kuf Samach Zayin is going to be the last time we're going to do Kuf Samach Zayin with the addition to it. In a get, one of the words is Ritz Vareyat Muteres L'chol Adam. So the hey of a harei, they had to give the get quickly before Shkia, so they folded it when it wasn't fully dry, and the hay on the bottom, the legs extended downwards, and it started looking like a gimel. The right leg of the hay extended down, spread out, and it looked like a gimel now, like merged with the hay. It looked a little bit like a gimel. Could be read like a gimel. But they asked 3 kids, and all 3 read it like a hay, not like a gimel. And he says, and then the Tzemach Tzedek goes in short to discuss if these words b'chlal eret netzach adam are ma'akev in the get, not ma'akev in the get. And he says, but regarding the shaila of the letter, he says we could compare it to what that Ramah writes over here in Sifta Zayin, that if the kites of the yud is negeya and the aleph, it's kosher. And he says, and even though the Chalkas Mechaykik disagrees with the Ramah, because in the Sefer Torah it's possible, and the Beis Shmuel already for entries the Ramah says still no, According to the Ramah, you have to worry because the Ramah is not Madama Sefatera to a get. And by a get, all we care about is if the Tinnik reads at a Gimel or a Hey. And over here, the Tinnik reads at a Hey. That's why it goes into other issues with the get, which are not relevant to this sermon.
What's the Aleph? What do you say? The Gag is what touching Aleph?
The Gag, the Yud of the Aleph is touching the koitz of the Yud of the Aleph is touching it. This tshuva in Siman Kuf Samach, this tshuva which just read, the Kuf Samach Zayin, is the Tzemach Tzedek only discusses this question of this letter in the first paragraph and doesn't go into more details. But if you look in Siman Shin Pei Tes, which is on page 341, over there, because in Kuf Samach Zayin just discusses other issues afterwards about the Nar. In Shin Pei Tes, he goes more into this issue, into this discussion about this letter of the Hey of Vahareyat. He brings other svaras why it's mutter. First of all, he says, the Rambam writes in Ilchis Sefatera Mezuzas that when is a psul? When the shape of the letter became destroyed. Until it's no longer read as the original letter, cannot be read like the original letter, or it's read like a different letter. And based on that, the Tashbitz writes, according to the Rambam, that if you put the Aleph and you didn't connect the bottom Yud of the Aleph to the leg of the Aleph to the Aleph, still kosher. Why? Because every Tinnik is going to read like Aleph. Tzemach Tzedek says, the Tashbitz, all the poskim disagree with the Tashbitz, that by when it's split, it's a problem. Tzemach Tzedek says, if you look in Gemara Menachos, it's a right to the Tashbitz. So we can't just brush off the Tashbitz. And he says, if you look in Oirei Chaim, the Mechaber over there is Machmer. If the regular Aleph is touching, or the regular Hey, etc., according to the Rambam, according to the Tashbitz, it would be kosher. The Magen Avraham writes in all of these that they're apostle. But why is that? He says, because over there, all these, when it's touching, not when it splits, when it's touching, the ois was not originally done kesikuna. Over here, the original Hey of Vaharei was done kesikuna. It only later turned into something else. Additionally, this whole shaila is only by a sivatera, because sivatera needs ksivatama, by get doesn't need ksivatama, like we see in every tshuva that we're learning about this issue. And additionally, a tinnik reads it like a hey, not like a gimel. And then, if a tinnik reads it like a hey, then even a sivatera, the Rambam would say it's kosher. Halachas kam v'kam on the get. So then maybe you're going to say, you know what? This Hey was taka not written kesikuna. We'll see it one way, but maybe it was not written kesikuna, and it should become pasul. Right? If it was not written kesikuna. So Tzemach says, no, nobody's going to say this was not written kesikuna. In addition to the fact that we have the Tashbitz as Bechal Mater, it's clearly that here was written kesikuna and it was only mitzad geflossen. And then that Tzemach Tzedek adds one more svara to be mater in such a thing. He says, we know the nusach of the get. We all know the nusach of the get. And the story, the way it's written over there, the Vaharei at, everybody understands what letter should have been there. Everybody knows it's supposed to be Vaharei at. So therefore, it didn't change the mashmos, and everybody's clear that even if it would be a gimel, it would extend a little bit like a gimel, it would still nobody would read it differently. So therefore, it's kosher. And if by skipping this Vaharei, because it's Shailaf and Bichal need to have it in the get, the din is that it's kosher, halachas kam v'kam, if it's only a negia, and Tzemach Tzedek concludes over here in Shin Pei Tes, even the chatchila she could get married with this get. With this we conclude the shir.